mid-age, 47-year-old Indo-Caribbean woman of color, Indian heritage, born in Guyana. I have shoulder length hair that's mostly black, peppered with a lot of grays, and wearing a long green flowy dress with a pink and red scarf. And I'm wearing glasses today. I want to make the world accessible, and I'm inviting each of you on this journey with me. It is exhausting work, truly really is, but it's also very exhilarating work. Disability, pride, and belonging are fundamental human rights. These are words and a concept my family and I never heard about until my sister and I were mid-age adults. That's my sister Annie, and of course myself. So I'm Annie's oldest sister. She's a disabled artist, and she was born with cerebral palsy. She has many visible disabilities which you can immediately see. She uses a wheelchair and is fully reliant on a caretaker. Thanks, Mom. I, on the other hand, have non-apparent disabilities. People don't like to believe it when I say that I'm disabled. I have aged into my disabilities. I live with vertigo and I live with chronic pain. I say thanks to my body for whatever it is that it's giving to me. I've been working in travel and tourism since I was 19 years old, and our public lives didn't start until I was 41 and my sister was 39. At that time in our lives, we had faced a very difficult situation. One that if we didn't leave our homes and go out in public spaces and be with community, darkness and depression would have swallowed us alive. It was really a difficult time. And now that we've had the pandemic, many of you know what it's like to live in isolation, and that was our life before the pandemic. By that time of our crisis, we were going through such a difficult time, and I had been in travel and tourism for 20 years. I'd been able to fly across the globe with my husband, Neil, and my children, Ryan and Dia. We'd been able to experience many beautiful vacations across the world. We'd be able to relax, recharge, create a lot of new memories together, and then come back to our lives. During these times, my young children would ask, why can't Nani and Auntie come with us? Basically, as little children, they wanted to pack everybody up and bring them along with us. On these vacations, though, I was struggling. I was struggling when they would ask because I knew what I was feeling. This overwhelming sadness that I couldn't have this experience with my own mom and sister. Our young children at that time were not yet exposed to the shame and discrimination people with visible disabilities faced in public. To them, we were a normal family that deserved a vacation together. In the midst of our crisis in 2018, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be nice if we can just go on a vacation together, get away, relax a little, eat some delicious food, and come back to deal with our crisis? We couldn't, though. We couldn't travel long distances, not with a wheelchair user. At least that's what I thought then. We didn't have a lot of money to plan a vacation. And who knew what destination was accessible for us to go to? On top of that, how would people treat us in public? I was afraid of public humiliation because of Annie's visible disabilities. People are cruel. Most people are kind. But we had to make a decision. We had to either decide if we were going to be worried about discrimination or if we were just going to leave our homes to be out in community to save ourselves. Our decision is obvious. We left our home. We're still alive. We're here today. I became really, really curious. I thought, well, we live in New York City, the place where every single tourist wants to go to. We get 68 million tourists a year. And I thought, there's got to be disabled people that comes to our city. What are they doing when they come here? And I started doing a lot of online searches. What is accessible in New York? What can we do? How can we get out of our homes? I didn't find a lot of accessibility information. Everything I found was buried in footers on website, and I read more digital compliance statements. I probably had them all memorized at that point in time. It was nothing about accessibility. Representation and photography on people with disability, you can completely forget about those. It looked like they belonged to the 1980s and they should have stayed there. But you know what I did find out, and you heard it this morning. 25% of the US population are people with disabilities. That's 1 in 4 person. This wasn't something that I knew as a travel marketer. I also found out that there's 1 billion people across the whole world. 1 billion people. 15% of our worldwide population were disabled. And their market value was over $8 trillion. That's more zeros than I can imagine as a marketer. Yet I was not thinking about these people from a marketing segmentation point of view. I was really shocked. I realized that I was also the problem. I didn't think of people with disabilities in the work that I did. I didn't think of them as a market segment. I didn't think of my own mom and sister as persons who can go on a vacation. I didn't think of people with disabilities as part of travel and tourism. I never saw representation, and representation is really important. The only stories I heard in the organizations that I worked with were about lawsuits. And somehow at the back of my mind, I thought, things must be really, really bad out there, because if every disabled person is filing a lawsuit, then they must be feeling some type of discrimination. It also made me believe that we as a family didn't belong in public. We shouldn't go because it's a terrible place to be. After barely finding accessible information, the outdated photography, I knew something had to be done. This wasn't just about us. This wasn't just about our family. This was 25% of the population who I thought must be dealing with the same thing that we're dealing with. No accessible information, no visible representation. And I thought, well, let me approach the prominent organizations in New York City that should be doing this work. So when I asked them, why aren't they marketing to people with disabilities? One organization basically gave me like a laundry list and said, these things are accessible. So it was just bullet points, nothing else. I had to take their word for it. The other organization had a few very, very dryly written articles from a reporting perspective. There was no beauty. There was no marketing. It was like, here, this is what's accessible. You go do it. When I kept saying, but we need more information about the places and we need to see representation of disabled people, they didn't want to do anything else. And so I decided I am going to do something about it. We as a family had already decided we were going to go out in public to save ourselves from this crisis that we were dealing with. We were going to go out. We were going to be in community. And I thought, if we were going to be in places, I can take these photographs and I can document accessibility from whatever it is that we find. And so we said, okay, we'll give this a try. With a lot of anxiety and intimidation, we had to plan our first day out. I remember telling my mom, we'll go to the New York Botanical Garden. It is the closest attraction near to our home. But I also remember telling her, let's just book transportation for an hour or two, because if we faced any discrimination when we were out, we'd get out of there really, really fast. We have to book accessible transportation a day in advance, and we cannot change it on the day of. So this was mental preparation for discrimination. Couldn't even possibly think that you might enjoy doing something out in public with Annie's visible disability. Come the day of our trip, it was an unusually warm spring day. The warmest spring day probably for the season. Do you know what happened? We got to the garden. everybody else is out in the garden because it's so warm. There was no hiding for us. And we also found out it was the last day of their beloved orchid show. We had no idea. Everybody loves orchids. We get there knowing that we have a short period of time. The lines were really, really long. And I said, okay, so we mightn't see the orchids, but let's at least stand in the line. We stand in the line, and would you guess what happened? A staff walked up to us and said, do you know you can go to the front of the line with a wheelchair user? Let me take you. I was like, what? You can go to the front of the line? Who knew that an attraction had a policy in place that if you're disabled, you can get to the front of the line? None of us knew in our family. We felt a sense of belonging. We enjoyed the orchids, but we also felt a sense of belonging by the warm welcome that we received and knowing that an organization had policies that thought about people like us. So with my marketing skills, no money and no time, these are always the things with accessibility, no money, no time. But with my family support, I embarked on creating Accessible Travel NYC, and it is in defiance of the societal norms surrounding people with disabilities. Our mission to inspire, empower, and enrich the lives of people with disabilities to enjoy public joys. The representation that we didn't see before, we created for ourselves and many others like us. We slowly went from hiding in shame to creating joys in public. Some of our ordinary days became extraordinary. As you can tell, Annie and I sat at a bar for the very first time in our 40s, things that so many people take for granted because we found an accessible bar in New York City. Annie and I had our first carousel ride at the Bronx Zoo. Information that wasn't public, but we found out that we can use a carousel when we got there. We've danced under the disco ball at Lincoln Center. We've enlivened museums with our laughter to the point of I'm always saying, shh, they're gonna kick us out of here. And my children actually skated with Annie in an ice rink. I'm on there just for the photo op. I refused to break a bone, and my mom was really smart. She stayed all the way behind. And we have seen all 5 of the top observatories in New York City. Bucket list checked. I don't know anyone else who can say that. As we were accepted at more and more places, our pride and our joys grew, and it helped us through our crisis. Looking back, what kept us out of the public to begin with? From our childhood onwards, we were told that Annie wasn't normal. When we would go out as children, people would always ask, what's wrong with her? They wanted to know if she could be fixed. They wanted to know if there was a cure for her. Now when people ask me this question, I get to ask them, well, what's wrong with you? Maybe you should stay home. When we would be out in public, people would also take out money from their pockets and give it to Annie. That's because they believe that she's so poor, they're saving her life by giving her this money. I'm always tempted to tell them, if you're not paying for vacations, we don't want the money. What would also happen in religious setting, people, that's our friends, that's our family, would say Annie's condition is a curse. And not only a curse for Annie, but a curse that the whole family must endure collectively together. This is the religious model of disability, and it's not only in Hinduism. Many, many religions say that disability is a curse. I'm usually tempted to say now when they ask us this or tell us these things, I would say, have you seen us dancing in public? Have you heard us laughing in public? What a curse it is, huh? These were always people's choices and behaviors towards us. Put this lifetime of experience together, rarely seeing positive representation of people with disabilities, lack of stories from disabled people, and lack of positive coverage in the media, what do you get? You get shame. And what does shame create? It creates an invisible barrier telling you that you're not welcomed in these public spaces and these public joys don't belong to you. As I continued learning, I learned about the social model of disability, which was a game changer for me. This model states that disability, it's a natural, normal part of human diversity. When you think about it, Annie and I are normal people. She was born the way she was born, and I've aged into my disability. It was revolutionary for me to think that we were just normal people that belongs to society. Disability isn't something that happened out there to the 1 billion people in the world. It's here, it's in this body, it's in this room, and it's a collective part of our human experience. Our industry would be far more inclusive if we all adopted the social model of disability. When everyone belongs, we increase our well-being, we're more innovative, we get financial rewards from that $8 trillion that I talked about, and we create stronger communities. All of it comes back to our behaviors. Each of us in this room, it's up to us to create that environment, to welcome people with disabilities in. All of the challenges to accessibility and disability inclusion, I think you're all going to agree with me. It's complicated, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lack of knowledge, and there's always not enough time and budget. This happens across every industry and sector that I work in within travel and tourism, and I think it's universal. But I'm standing here to tell you that for the 20 years that I didn't even know what my own family can do out in public, to the things that we've achieved in the last 6 years, that disability inclusion and accessibility, it's very possible in each of the work that you are doing. The secret is, it's that you have to make a commitment, you have to make a genuine decision, and you have to start somewhere. It's part of a continued journey. It's not you do it one time and it's over with. It's very much part of a continued journey and ongoing, just like every other thing that we do in our industry. So what happens when we don't think about accessibility in our work and disability inclusion? We're left with weaker communities, we're losing revenue, we're missing on innovation, and we're limiting our own future. Have all of you thought about how you might possibly age into disabilities? Let me scare you a little and walk you through what happened to our bodies. In our 20s to our 30s, our body slowly loses its ability to repair itself. In our 40s to our 60s, these changes accelerate. We often have vision issues. Here I am. When we're in loud restaurants, some of us can't hear because we've already lost our high frequency hearing. Our mobility starts to slow down a little. Our joints creak just as much as our stairs creak when we're going up them. And we forget things a little bit. I am in this age category. When I wear my contact lens, I have 3 pairs of glasses in my bag. When I'm in a restaurant, I'm that person that's like this. With my menu, I don't understand why people choose such tiny fonts to begin with. I'm also the person that when I'm at a conference, the social hour that happens later in the day, it's often in a dark room. After 2 glasses of wine, everybody's excited to talk to everybody else, and I can't hear a word because the music is blasting and it's dark and I can't read lips anymore. And I'm the one that's nodding my head to the conversation that's happening, and I'm doing thumbs up. I know some of you know exactly what I'm talking about because it happens so often in our industry, and yet we do it over and over and over again. Enter our 60s, and we do have people that work in our industry in our 60s and beyond. These shifts starts to grow. We're wearing hearing aids. We have multiple pair of eyeglasses. Mobility aids becomes a normal part of our lives as our hearing aids, and memory loss becomes more prevalent. Guess what age most of us live to? 80 years old. So technology and innovation like talking to our smartphones on Siri and captioning, those were all innovation that were made for people with different types of disabilities that we become reliant on. So when we are not thinking about disability and accessibility now and creating that world for ourselves, we are writing our own selves out of our future life. So ask yourself, what's holding you back from disability inclusion and accessibility work? Is it the time, the money, or the uncertainty? We had to change our own mindset to save our own lives and to start from somewhere without the lack of resources. No money, no time. You too need to do the same thing. It is a mindset change for each of you in the room. In order to create belonging for people with disabilities, you have to create an environment. Make the decision, and it has to be a genuine decision. Commit the time and budget. Talk to your bosses. Some of your bosses might be in the room here today. And understand disabilities and accessibility from different perspectives. It's simple processes, and it can be complicated. I was very truthful at the beginning that it's very exhausting work. It is, because not everybody or everyone on the team is willing to participate and commit the budget and commit the time to the work. But when you break it down into these little pieces, it becomes digestible. Once you break down disabilities and the different access needs, if there's something that you're unsure of, please ask the disabled community for feedback. Then you can move on to creating welcoming spaces. That can be physical spaces. You can create programs and events like this. And then at the end, you ask for continuous feedback so that you can continually improve on this journey. For this part of our industry, what tends to happen is information isn't shared ahead of time on accessibility. Information is a pretty important part when you're disabled of what we need. Then you come in on the day of the event, and all of the staffs don't know what the accessibility is. That's something that's often missing because they think that accessibility and disability inclusion is just one coordinator on the side, but you need to train all of the staffs. That's how you hold it together and make it stronger. And in the end, the feedback that you get for your event or program, it's the feedback that you must implement into the next one. And that's how it becomes the continuous journey. So today, Annie and I can stand here from everything that we've gone through and from the way people treat us. We went from longing to belonging, from shame to pride in who we are, to intentional public joys. We lead community programs in New York. We teach about disability pride. If you didn't know that there's a disability pride flag, those are it on the pins, and that's Annie's artwork as an artist. We are working with a lot of organization on these disability pride programs, which opens up their doors to new audiences, which means they're earning money, We're also creating well-being in our communities because we're talking about pride and people are feeling more hopeful, more resilient. We also get paid for this so we can pay for our vacation. So nobody needs to take out that money from their pockets and give it to us. The other thing is that we feel really, really good about the work that we're doing because we're finally writing a story that includes us and so many others like us. Up on the board, I didn't talk about it, but we've won a tremendous amount of awards for our disability pride work with our community. And we've won a Webby Award for dancing out in public at Lincoln Center with our visible disabilities and our non-apparent disabilities. These are the same types of rewards and awards that awaits the people that make a step into this commitment. You can do it for the innovation for yourself. You do it to build stronger communities. You do it for the financial rewards. And above all, you're doing it for your future self. Because remember, disability, pride, and belonging are fundamental human rights for me, for you, for the billion people out there. Because in the end, disability, pride really and truly does belong. Thank you.